Welcome to the Global News Podcast on YouTube, where we go behind the headlines of a story and tell you why it really matters. On this episode, we discuss why one woman's detention in Shanghai has fueled a diplomatic row between Beijing and Delhi. Pema Wangjom Thongdok, an Indian citizen living in the UK, was detained by immigration officials while travelling from London to Japan via Shanghai last Friday because her passport lists her birthplace as the northeastern Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh. China disputes India's claim over the region and considers Arunachal its territory, calling it South Tibet. Now, this is something India firmly rejects. So why has this area been a subject of such a dispute between two of Asia's biggest countries? And how likely is it that it's going to be resolved going forward? To discuss this, I'm joined by our South Asia regional expert, Anbarasan Ethirajan, who joins me down the line. So, Anbarasan, just give us a bit of background and context as to what's happened.
Now, this Indian woman, she travelled to Japan via Shanghai last Friday. And Ms. Thongdok says that she was detained at Shanghai airport without any reason. And the birthplace mentioned in the passport was Arunachal Pradesh. It is a northeastern state of India. And this has been an issue going on between China and India for decades. And as you said, India claims the Arunachal Pradesh state. It is in Indian control. But China has also been making claims over this territory. And the two countries fought a brief war in 1962. Now, this has triggered a diplomatic row between Delhi and Beijing because this made headlines across India and also on social media. And Ms. Thongdok says that she was detained for several hours, and then after the Indian consular officials came to the airport and spoke to the Chinese officials, then she was allowed to travel. Now, China calls this as South Tibet. And India says that it has always been an Indian territory. And this was all based on 1914. During the colonial period, there was a line drawn. It's called the McMahon line, and which China doesn't accept. Now, this has now triggered another row because the two countries have been having very tense relations from 2020 when there was a clash in the Ladakh region. And things started improving for the past year when both countries were trying to reset relations. Now, the Indian Foreign Ministry took strong objection to the detention of Ms. Thongdok, saying that the Chinese authorities have still not been able to explain their actions, which are in violation of several conventions governing international air travel. And the Foreign Ministry spokesperson described the detention as arbitrary and said the issue had been taken up strongly with China. At the same time, the Chinese Foreign Ministry officials are saying that they deny having detained her, and they say that local laws and regulations were followed. And at the same time, they also say China never accepted the illegal Arunachal Pradesh because they say it is part of China. So they claim the whole of Arunachal Pradesh as part of China. So this has triggered another round of diplomatic tensions between the two countries.
So, Anbarasan, this is obviously a region which has been disputed for quite some time. You know it well. You've actually visited it before. So what did you see when you were there? And just talk to us about why it's such a key area in that particular region.
Now, we have to understand this in this context of a broader India-China border tensions and border dispute. India and China, they are the two big Asian powers. They share a border of more than 3,400 kilometers, starting from in the Ladakh region in the Himalayas, going all the way up to Arunachal Pradesh, close to Myanmar. And most of it is undemarcated, and they have overlapping territorial claims. So this has led to border frictions over the years. As I said earlier, there was even a brief border war in 1962 in which China defeated India and then they unilaterally pulled out. So since then, both sides have held various rounds of negotiations. If I can recollect, in 1996, one of the talks I was covering in Delhi, so they had for more than 30 years, I've been following these India-China relations. But, the economic growth, both countries were focusing. So the border issue was put at the back burner for nearly 25 years. And then it all flared up in 2020 June in the Ladakh region in the northern part of India, where a clash between the two sides killed about 20 Indian soldiers and 4 Chinese troops. That triggered massive tensions. Both sides amassed troops. More than 50,000 troops on both sides were deployed, and the tensions were running high. And they also moved heavy weapons along the border. Now, in the past 1 year, they have been talking, and there were several rounds of talks between the two sides, and the border patrolling have resumed. They say that they have reached an understanding. But still, the troops are there on both sides, an eyeball-to-eyeball situation. For example, in Arunachal Pradesh, these border posts can be like a bit less than 100 to few hundred meters. So they are in an eyeball-to-eyeball situation. And I was in Arunachal Pradesh a couple of years ago. The state has a regional government, and they are very much part of India. And whereas you just go across the border post, that is Tibet, where Chinese have amassed troops, and they say that this is part of the southern Tibet. So this has been an issue. But what the both countries are saying is that, okay, this is a long-running dispute. This has to go through various discussions and diplomatic level talks. They cannot be resolved now. This is something for the future. So the people there, they are normal, getting along with their lives. But you also see a lot of developmental work. And both sides are building what they call border villages along Arunachal Pradesh, India, as well as China. And some of the areas are very remote. One of the areas I went was Chumigyatse Holy Waterfalls. This is very important for Buddhists. It considers a very significant religious site. And it was just on the border between India and China across the McMahon line. So you always see various troop movements, army trucks going on. You have several army camps, Indian army camps in these areas. But then people there, when I speak to them, they were getting along despite this massive presence of two of the biggest armies. People getting along with their regular lives, and it is also very inhospitable territory. Some of the areas are more than 13,000, 15,000 feet, and so this has been a major bone of contention between India and China. So this women's experience has brought light once again how a smaller issue can trigger even a diplomatic row.
So, Anbarasan, let's finish off with the relationship between China and India. The two leaders have seemed to get along when they've met up in person. Recently, there seems to be more air traffic flow between the two countries as well, airports opening up. How likely is this spat going to continue for? And can this be resolved quickly? Because it seems as though the two countries are getting along a bit better now.
Yeah, this came as a bit of a surprise for many people because for the past 2 years, both governments have been taking concrete steps to restore ties. We should not forget that China is one of the biggest trading partners of India. Several Indian factories, Indian manufacturers that depend on Chinese goods. And at the same time, what we are looking at is step by step they're improving relations. They realize that there's a conflict is not a way to go around. That is what both leaders have been saying. Now what they want is to restore relations, and that's why you see the flight services resuming. But this can be solved diplomatically, but it depends on how the two countries want to take this forward.
Anbarasan Ethirajan, our South Asia regional expert, thank you so much for your time. If you enjoyed this story or other world stories, then do check out our Global News podcast, which you can download from wherever you get your podcasts from. And please do give this episode a like and subscribe to our BBC News YouTube channel. We really appreciate it. And of course, drop us a comment below. If there are any stories you'd love us to cover and you think that we could do more of, then we'd be happy to do so. Thank you so much for your company.